Hello, everyone. This is Chala Dinkoy, CEO and founder of the Repositioning Expert. It is Tuesday tea time with Chala today, and oh my goodness, it's almost dinner time. And while I am not hungry, I am a little bit exhausted. These are always at the end of the day. I have no idea how the day went by. It's been crazy busy. It's so wonderful. Yeah, I can't even remember my workout this morning, and it felt like it feels like a week ago. So, what am I talking about today is the cost of not listening for businesses. And it's pretty devastating for some businesses not to listen. And I'm going to break it down in what forms of listening they're not doing and what it's costing them and how to turn that around. So, let me take a sip and then we'll get started. It's kind of timely because yesterday I watched a movie called "The Sound of Metal," and it's about a rock musician um, who goes deaf. And I don't want to give away. I guess I am going to have to give away the ending. But anyway, so I did not know, and he did not know that if you get implants to reverse your deafness, it sounds like a constant, distortion of sound. So it's like an enormous chaos in your head. So it's so timely that I came up with this topic based on some of the reading that I was doing this morning. But I won't tell you the end of the movie. But yeah, it's a bitter disappointment to him, obviously, to have this. The cost of hearing for him is so awful. If you haven't seen the movie, it's really good. Go see it. Bit of a tearjerker. So let me get to you about the cost of not listening for businesses. So you would think that listening is the most logical thing to do, but when they do studies and they ask people how important is listening, it only comes out like 11% people think listening is not that important. But especially in business, it is super important. And I've structured it down into different levels. So the employee level, I call it. So in the conversation level, Tom Peters, who's the author of In Search of Excellence, he talks about, and he, in conjunction with a Harvard professor, he did a study and he found that entrepreneurs, leaders, including physicians like doctors, actually interrupt patients or employees 18 seconds into their conversation. So they ask a question, and then when the person's answering, they cut them off at the 18-second mark. It's a huge finding and a huge revelation as to why things are going wrong, especially with your employees and especially if you're a business leader. And I'm going to give you some ways to work around that and to develop your listening skills more. Now, the second level is, as a business, it's listening to the market level. And in the market, I'll give you the example of when you are not listening to the market and you're running your business based on your assumptions, it can really hurt you. So, one of my clients, very early on in my business, had the assumption that because her father had been an immigrant and who had been a C-suite level immigrant who had come to Canada and was now, kind of like at the cab driver or the concierge at my building level of employment, much, much lower than their counterparts in the same country that they emigrated to, and certainly much lower than the country they came from. She thought there was a niche there that she could help. So she became a career coach for CEOs who were immigrating into Canada. And lo and behold, there was not one person who was doing her job, her exact niche. She actually won an award from the government, but yet she had no paying clients. So what we found out, and what she refused to do because this was so close to her heart, and because she didn't, she was so sure about this niche that she didn't want to go out and actually listen to the market and ask the people who would hire her whether they would hire someone like that and whether they would pay the kind of money that she was asking for. She did no market listening, and therefore, unfortunately, she had to very quickly pivot to some other form of consulting. I think she landed on HR consulting, and she was brilliant at it. So That's the second level of not listening. And then the third level of not listening is not listening to your customers. And I'm really looking forward to seeing, apparently there's a documentary about Abercrombie and Fitch. I've always talked about them in my marketing training. I talk about it in my book. And they defined this very elitist, beautiful, very white kind of brand character for their ideal. And when I was teaching brand character, I actually talked about them because even though the CEO at the time, this was like 15 years ago, was quoted for saying he hates fat people. He was fired afterwards, and new management was brought in. And there were lots of lawsuits against the actual company for being racist, both in their internal practices and with their customers. But what ended up happening is it's because they were so clear on what their brand was, and their brand, they knew and they wanted it to be aspirational, and they defined the brand as that beautiful washboard ab kind of popular high school Ken and Barbie kind of brand character. And what they didn't realize is that the brand is not stronger than what the market trends and what the customers want. And so they stopped listening to the customer. And what the customer wanted was more diversity. They wanted more inclusion, and that's where the whole market went. So that's another example of not listening to your customers, is not seeing what they're asking for and not reflecting back what you're giving back to them. So what are some of the techniques? And according to this is the Harvard Business Review, there was a study done on listening techniques. And so here are some of the ways that you can improve your listening techniques. Now, first at the conversation level, the employee and the direct one-on-one level, is one of the tips and tricks is repeat the last few words that they said, so you're both on the same page. Another one is don't rephrase, just repeat exactly what you heard, because again, in the research, they found that people were getting upset when you rephrased what they said because your words may not convey exactly what they were trying to say. So just repeat it, even though it's repetitive. It's a really good listening technique to just repeat exactly what they said. Nonverbal cues are huge in listening. And, I'm a certified and trained coach. We had listening classes and courses. So we learned a lot, especially if you're in person, if you're on Zoom, and you can even hear some of these. It says nonverbal, but it could be hemming and hawing and smiling or laughing. But the nonverbal cues, you have to look for them and you have to give them. And some of the nonverbal cues, obviously, for listening is, eye engagement, facing your body towards them, leaning in, being on the edge of your seat, all these things saying like, I'm listening cues. You have to give and receive from them. You have to look for the fact that are they listening. Another tactic for good listening is asking questions. Now, you don't want to ask off-base questions. You don't want to ask too many questions, but generally when you ask questions about the topic from the person speaking, they understand that you're listening. And then the last advice around that one-on-one listening is to brush it up, is don't listen to talk. So don't be conjuring what to respond or ask with when you're hearing them speak. And it used to be when this is unfortunately how it used to be when I was first learning how to sell, because when I asked a question, I was so nervous about the next question to ask that I couldn't even hear what they were saying. It took such a long time for me to practice on so many sales calls and so many sales conversations for me to actually listen to what they're saying and then ask the next question. So try to do that. So now what about market level? This is where in order to truly listen to the market, you have to strategically go out and talk to groups of prospects, potential prospect groups of people who are cohesive. So I always say whether they congregate by industry or interest group, You have to find groups of people who are in similar situations and positions and ask them strategic questions that relate to your target, to your market, and to whatever you do as a solution to that target. So the market level listening has to be done strategically, and it has to be also done um, regularly. So regular touch points and checkpoints where you're constantly checking and cleaning up your assumptions. Because if you run on assumptions like my client did and refuse to check in with the market, and you refuse to listen to what the market has to say because you refuse to ask them, you can really lose a lot of time and money. Now, lastly, in the customer level, you need to set up systems and programs of every level, internal, external, to be able to keep a pulse point of your the people that work with you, the people that work for you, and your customers. So have a feedback program for both of them, have regular check-ins with customers, and then of course outside third party um, auditors, counselors, whoever you can get. The more focus you have on listening to your customers, the more you can develop around their needs. And you'll never lose when you're listening. But there are so many instances of when businesses stop listening or never even know to start listening and just go on their assumptions, go on as business as usual, because it takes time, energy, and effort to listen. Not just in the way that I'm listening to you one on one, but also on the market level and the customer level. So I hope that was a little bit of insight. I hope these, Tuesday tea times always make you pause and think and then reflect on whether you're doing this in your business or not. I certainly do. Whenever I'm doing these topics, I think about how I can improve on what I'm doing in the topic that I'm presenting. And I hope these are useful, and keep listening. Keep listening to me and keep listening to others around you so that you can improve your business. All the best, everyone. See you next Tuesday.